It's time for the controversial trapdoor modification. Skip to the 4-minute mark to go straight to the cutting. Plastic that covers up the spare tire is unscrewed and removed. Followed by the center trunk plastic. If you aren't already subscribed to my channel, please hit that sub button. The trunk beauty cover mounts are unscrewed. Unbolt the very tight rear seat mounts. And then some random screws are removed, then pull the plastic from the car. The passenger side gets the same treatment. Remove the T-top bag mounts. Pull up the rear carpet. Some areas are glued in place. So we need to remove the gas tank. To do that, the axle needs to be lowered. Raise the rear of the car and then use jack stands on the chassis and not the axle. Then lower the axle down. Go ahead and remove the wheels. Since my axle is modified, I have to remove the lower control arms and the shock mounts. And now my axle can be lowered for gas tank clearance. I used 2 jack stands to support the axle, and make sure not to accidentally pinch the brake lines. I went ahead and removed my panhard support bar and the panhard bar for more room. The gas tank is dropped by unbolting the 2 straps. And some of my long-term viewers might notice that this footage is from a few years ago. Use a tall car jack to support the gas tank. Lower it down and then unplug the fuel pump wires. Once the fuel pump is unplugged, you can remove the gas tank. It can be a little bit awkward, but just be patient and the tank will drop out. Moving on to my new Aeromotive gas tank. I covered the sending unit in some tape in order to protect it. My axle needed a little bit of maintenance, so I just removed it to make even more room. Install the new gas tank with the original straps. Place some tape on the area above the trunk. I wasn't 100% sure where the fuel pump trapdoor should go on this particular setup, so I erred on the side of caution. I started by drilling a single small hole and seeing how close the hole was to my sending unit. I used a marker in the hole to make a little dot on the sending unit. It looks like the marker is about in the center of the sending unit, so I cut a small 1-inch hole where that was. I found it easier to use a 1.5-inch cutoff wheel and a Dremel to cut this sheet metal. The trunk area sheet metal is super thin, so it doesn't take much to cut through it. I did many test cuts and fitment and slowly made a larger hole. I kept dropping the gas tank over and over again since I didn't want to damage it, but it looks like that was a bit unnecessary. Once the hole got close enough to what I wanted, I then peeled off the tape. I'm using a Detroit Speed trapdoor kit. However, it's a bit large for a 3rd gen, so I 3D printed a trapdoor that would fit a lot better. And this version is 3 inches more narrow and fits a lot better. I went ahead and chopped off 3 inches off the Detroit Speed plate. It fit my 3D printed template, so I ground some grooves into it and started welding the 2 cuts together. To keep distortion in check, I clamped it to a 1/4 inch steel plate. I also welded from opposite direction to avoid warpage. And this plate welded extremely cleanly. I was actually very surprised. Once the parts were welded together, I then ground the welds flat. As you can see, this plate is a way better fit. A quick trace and the final bit of sheet metal is removed. I clamped down the plate and used a flapper wheel to remove any excess metal for a nice flush finish. Remove any paint in the areas that will be welded. This includes the underside of the car as well. With all the areas prepped for welding, it's now time to throw on some welds. I had my friend Nate weld this up because he's a better welder than me and I wanted this to turn out really well. We initially placed a tack weld every 1 inch, but later on discovered that we really needed a tack weld every 1/2 inch. Start by laying down a nice fillet weld. Most of the heat is focused on the thick plate as the sheet metal is super thin. Heat is kept at a minimum to avoid warpage. And this is a good area to use the pulse setting on a TIG welder if you have that option. After my buddy laid down some excellent beads, I welded the inside of the plate. I then used a flapper wheel to grind everything nice and flush, while also removing oxidation from the welds. I taped off the trapdoor hole, then painted the underside with some gray Por 15 top coat. Once the paint is dry, tape underneath the hole. And the top is taped off. I hit the car with a layer of automotive primer, followed by a few coats of some Arctic White single stage that I had mixed for my car. I ran a heater in my garage to make sure that the metal stayed above 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Once the paint is dry, go ahead and remove the masking. And now it's time to cut the top aluminum plate. My El Cheapo bandsaw makes quick work of it. Some quick grinding on the plate for some fine-tuned fitment. The 1/4-inch holes are drilled into the plate, then they're deburred. I did have to enlarge the plate holes a little bit over a 1/4 inch. Since the plate was welded and cut, it didn't line up perfectly. Looks like it fits pretty good. I scuffed up the black coating with some sandpaper. I then painted the plate with some flat black. I went ahead and installed some sound damper on the tank where the straps mount. This should help keep the straps tight and maybe help dampen out some sound from the tank. I installed my gas tank for the final time. My original gas cap didn't fit for some reason, so I got this parts store one that fit pretty good. I then accidentally broke it about 5 minutes later and had to buy a new one. Whoops. Install the aluminum plate and tighten it down with the supplied stainless button head bolts. I gotta say, this trapdoor looks pretty good. It's very strong and gives me plenty of room for my fuel fittings. Thanks for watching this video. If you made it this far, make sure to subscribe and follow me on Instagram.